Welcome, James. Welcome to the SDNCAST. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here. I'm really excited to be here at Futuretech, a really nice conference. And it was cool to connect with everyone. It's kind of a nice backdrop people can see, just really lively, and got some strip waffle, so I'm doing good. Sugar high.
Sugar high. Well, about a high, your session was great. I visited your session this morning. It was really great. Tell the people that were not here in a few sentences what your session was about.
Yes, I think for Futuretech, I really want to look at what's not just in .NET today, but what's really coming down and what developers are really interested in. So I think with .NET, we've been really focused, of course, on the app workloads for web development and mobile development and desktop development. So it's a really special area really around cloud native development, what the work the team is doing around the core of .NET, and also simplifying development of cloud native apps with .NET Aspire, which is a new opinionated sort of stack for building cloud native apps with .NET. And then additionally, of course, it's 2024, so we got to talk about AI.
Of course.
So I think it's a really great time to talk about AI for .NET. We haven't talked tons about it. We've seen some demos with it, but now the team is really building out really great end-to-end stories and also thinking about how to enable more developers to adopt AI technology without having to learn the entire stack of AI.
Wow, so I saw a couple of your demos as well. So it looked really simple to add some AI to your applications and to enrich your application using AI. In about a year, are we still going to develop .NET?
Yeah, I think with AI, it's ever evolving. So it's even hard to talk about next year without what's happening next month, what's happening 2 months from now. It's a fascinating time because there are a lot of great SDKs and a lot of great tools out there for developers. Of course, developers today can integrate with OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, and other LLMs that are out there to easily do things such as get embeddings, tokenization, and of course, figure out how to send that information out to LLMs like GPT from OpenAI. But additionally, the world of AI is not just OpenAI. It's all of these other LLMs that developers want to use. Maybe it's Onyx to do local models. Maybe it's Gemini. Maybe it's other things. So in the world of .NET, there's an amazing library. It's not just .NET, but it's called Semantic Kernel. And what Semantic Kernel attempts to do is kind of be the operating system of AI for your applications. So it knows how to figure out the tokenization, embeddings, text embeddings. It figures out how to communicate with these different services. So instead of you having to figure out every API, how to process the data, how to come in, it streamlines it together. So I think in the year from now, right, as we look at it, I think all of that will get even easier. I've seen from a year to now, where it started, way less code, way more simplified.
But does that mean a shift in what we're going to do as a developer, or?
I think it depends. I think that there's tons of developers today that will adopt and look to infuse their apps if it makes sense for them with AI. But then there's a whole nother cohort of developers, such as myself actually, this is where I think I sit, which is I'm more of a client developer. I'm building websites, I'm building mobile apps. I want to sort of sprinkle in AI into it.
Yeah.
How does .NET make it easier? How does it enrich and sort of make my apps better without me having to learn all of that stuff I just talked about?
Yeah.
So the thing I talked about in my keynote was smart components. And think of them basically as smart controls. I think that in the next year, this is going to be super broad. And I think you're going to see tons of these from component vendors, from the .NET team, from other ecosystems. But basically it's how to enable developers to infuse AI in their apps by just adding smart controls. So smart text boxes,
and
smart buttons,
making smart decision where to use it and where not to use it.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
And now, a message from our sponsor.
Again, AI is good until you put it in the wrong place or it doesn't do the right thing. So the demo I showed was one from Steve Sanderson for smart components, which basically you're filling out, name, email, address, zip code, phone number. You get an email, you copy it, and instead of just going field by field, copy, paste, you load it into your clipboard, say smart paste, and it'll use GPT to just figure out where to put the info.
Yeah.
Exactly. So for me as a developer, Instead of adding a button, I add a smart button. And then it knows how to figure out things based on names, based on fields.
And
that's
talking
great.
about such a thing, aren't you afraid that the bill will be much higher at the end of the month? Because these tokens use background services.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what we'll see over the years, and the next year specifically when it comes to AI, is I think we're going to see more of those smaller, tighter models that'll be able to run on server, on device. You can do already that stuff today with some smaller models. And I hope that I see that type of really hyper-focused component have very specific models. So you could see a model being trained just on addresses. So you can say, hey, use the address model, whatever it is. And that's local, it's small, and it can write really compact.
And
so
you can run it on-prem, so...
You can run it on-prem.
Okay,
and then for more advanced things, like I showed another example of filling out an entire bug report. You can imagine going to Azure DevOps and you fill this all out. Well, that's going to be a lot of information. It could be very generic.
Yep.
So that might then hit your model. So I think it's important to keep track of that. I showed a lot of information, like looking at open telemetry, figuring out, looking at microservices, how long things are taking to run. So I think ideally as we simplify cloud native development, we also look at what's really useful for AI development, and ideally it's a lot of that telemetry, keeping costs down. I think you'll see a lot of that come online, and it's probably already online now, figuring out, okay, should I use GPT-4? Should I use 3.5? When do I use Turbo, right? Like, you don't always have to use the latest model, because a lot of these older models, and by older I mean like 6 months old, 1 year old, like
very old.
Very old. But 3.5 and 3.5 Turbo, super powerful models to do this stuff. You don't need GPT-4 Turbo, or you don't need Gemini to run an address one, right?
Yeah.
So you can tone it down, and ideally, it's really as a developer, tweaking and tuning those models. What can I run on-prem? When do I need to go online? And what services am I going to use to optimize those costs?
So we'll still be writing code in a couple of years from now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the best answer you can give, of course. But
yeah, I mean, I think as a developer, it's always a great time to be a developer. I feel like every year, productivity boosts between tooling, around services, whether they're online or in the IDE, continue to get better. The Visual Studio team just released new enhanced extensions for GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot Chat. And to me, it's like IntelliSense, but better, in many cases.
Intelligence on steroids.
Yeah, it's just upgraded. So I get access to more information, but it also means for me as a developer, I use it when I need it. You know what I mean? And there's certain files and certain things I'm doing where I know what I'm doing, and I can just write it faster myself. I kind of ignore what it's giving me. It's just like when there was full line completion, sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
What I found the most useful is like those really tedious tasks where it is a lot of code, like parsing JSON.
Repetitive tasks.
Repetitive tasks. I would go in and I'm parsing JSON, and because now Copilot knows about my solution and my workload, it'll just know how to fill in all the lines and fill everything for me. So for me, that's a huge win. And it's, accuracy you're going to check. It's an assistant, right?
Yep.
And I think as developers, it's a balance. How much do we want to be reviewing the code versus implementing the code? And I think we talk about the code flow often, the flow of code. So it's as you're coding, sometimes you're just going to ignore IntelliSense, just like you might ignore Copilot, right? But sometimes you're like, I'm figuring it out. And one interview I really liked was with my old CEO, Nat Friedman, who went on to be the CEO of GitHub and worked on Copilot as well. He was on a podcast called The Tech Meme Ride Home, and they interviewed him. And, it was great because they asked him very similar questions, like, hey, how do you feel about Copilot and coding? And he's like, for me, I don't get to code all the time. So I need to kind of get a refresher, and Copilot can help me kind of jumpstart my project and get me back into it. And at some point, I'll take over. Yeah. But it's going to help guide me through that process instead of having to go search 1,000 places. It brings it directly into there. And it was really cool to listen to him talk about the AI space from like a VC, and founder perspective, but also bringing it back to the roots of development. So it's nice to see it evolve. Yeah.
And on a final thought, people not using these tools yet, where could they get a jump start and use these latest technologies? Where can they find the information about it?
Well, I think the place is like the .NET blog. We have great things, the Visual Studio blog. Everything's open source nowadays. So like Aspire's open source. Like a lot of the samples are open source. If you go to the GitHub, github.com/.net, that's like the real home of everything .NET. So if you type in AI, you type in Aspire, you're going to find AI samples, and it'll really show you how to build everything from what I built on stage with simple chatbots to full AI solutions, to full cloud native solutions as well. And of course, if you're using Visual Studio or VS Code, you can just start a free Copilot trial. You're good to go in there. And Copilot's like so much more now too. It's in the browser, it's in the IDE, it's kind of everywhere. So it's great. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I hope to see you here next year so we can review what has come through of all of the opinions you have right now. So very interesting times coming up for developers.
I agree. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you again.
Cheers.
We hope you have enjoyed the show.